All right, last part of this lecture on abortion, I hope. So finally we get to the People Seeds case from, let's see, from Thompson's main line. And the People Seeds case is the last of the sort of really interesting arguments by analogy that Thompson gives. And here's kind of the thought or the issue. Is abortion permissible even in the case of pregnancy where one has taken precautions, used protection, and and she wants, and you know, it's a case, so it's not a case like due to rape or a case like that, a case where a person is fully informed of the risks that they're taking, and so they're undergoing consensual sexual activity, and then they get pregnant. So suppose one gets pregnant, then the question is, are we morally obligated to help out a fetus? That is, to continue to allow the fetus to stay implanted and to use the woman's body. Thompson's point in a certain way is that is to say that you have to give the fetus the right to use your body. It doesn't come with a right over your body. That would be a positive right that the fetus would have to use your body. The fetus doesn't have that to begin with because she thinks that there really aren't any such rights. There aren't what we would call natural, positive, perfect rights. That is a natural right that you have all the time, that is positive, that is to being helped, to having your well-being promoted in some way. Fetuses don't kind of come into the world even with the natural right to life, to not have their life taken from them. They don't have the right to use someone else's body without their permission, in a sense. And that brings us to the People Seeds case, right? So in the People Seeds case, we've got these people seeds that drift into the house and take root. Now, you've used, the example goes that you've used every precaution available short of living in a house that has no carpet or furniture. So this is supposed to be analogous to, you've taken every precaution while having intercourse, short of having a full-blown hysterectomy, where, if you don't know, a hysterectomy is where a woman's entire reproductive system is basically surgically removed. Now, question. So you've got, basically you live in this house, you've got your windows open, you've got these fine mesh screens on your windows, but you just so happen to live in a world where people are, born because, seeds float into a house and take root in the upholstery and furniture and begin to grow. Now, you have these fine mesh screens on your windows, and the seed still floats in, right? You didn't realize that there was a defect in the screen. It's supposed to be analogous, to like some kind of birth control. And the seed takes root in your carpet. Question, does the seed have a right to stay in your carpet and grow? It only takes 9 months for it to grow, and then it's a baby, and then you can send it to the adoption agency or whatever. Does the seed have a right to grow in your house? Does its right to life somehow outweigh your right to not want it growing in your house? Can you uproot it, thereby causing its death? So here's the People Seeds case is supposed to be analogous in a number of different ways. So to intercourse. So is it reasonable to expect a woman to abstain completely from sexual intercourse? Answer, no, right? Sex is fun. Sex is interesting. People are going to have sex. Now, if a woman can't reasonably be expected to abstain from sex. Um, and the only way she could have prevented the creation of a certain kind of fetus is by having abstained from sex. Um, then it seems that a woman's right to life, right to her own self-control, is stronger than a fetus's right to life. And so, if the only way that a woman could have prevented a pregnancy would have been to abstain from sex, she does not act immorally in getting an abortion. In the people seeds case, then, can you reasonably be expected to not open your windows, right? The idea here is supposed to be like opening your windows is the analogy of living in a world, and then you want to enjoy it. You want to like having sex, opening your windows. I like my analogy a little bit better. Having sex is like going to Disneyland. It's something that you do once in a while, and it's fun. It's nice to go to Disneyland. You don't have to do it every day. I think you should open your windows probably every day. I mean, maybe it'd be nice to open your windows or to go to Disneyland every day. But in the people seeds case, can you reasonably expected to never open your windows? Of course not, right? But what if you haven't checked to see if all of your screens are going to work in the people seeds case? Well, I mean, that's supposed to be analogous. Like every time you go to have sex, do you have to check to see whether or not the condom is working, or determine whether or not your birth control pill is going to work that day? Of course not. So now let's get back to supererogation. So supererogation, Thompson's point of view, Thompson's attempted sort of argument, and thing that she wants to say here is that there's a difference between doing what's right and doing what's good. And there's a difference between being what we might think of as minimally decent and doing what's right. Being minimally decent is to do what's right and do what's good above and beyond sometimes. That is, sometimes to act in supererogatory ways and to do a little bit more than just what you have to do according to morality. Thompson thinks that a fetus doesn't have a right to a woman's body, but that it would constitute but that it would be supererogatory in a lot of ways for a woman to allow a fetus to use her body, right? And that seems right. Now, does that mean that Thompson thinks it's always permissible or always wrong, or I mean, always morally acceptable to have an abortion at any time when a woman decides to no longer grant the fetus the right to continue living in her body? No, that's not what Thompson's point is. She thinks that in some cases, a woman would be morally monstrous for not allowing a fetus to stay, to stay alive. So we can start to think about cases like this, and we'll get to the Kitty Genovese case in a second. So imagine a scenario in which a pregnancy didn't last for 9 months. Imagine a case in which pregnancy only lasted a day. Well, in that case, it would be somewhat, it would be a lot less of a hassle to be pregnant. In that kind of case, it would seem having an abortion where like a woman's life was not on the line would be a much bigger, decision. It would be a lot harder to say that it was acceptable to have the abortion. I mean, this is also always assuming that the child can be put up for adoption if a woman's unable to take care of the child, and that the adoption agency would be acceptable and not, problematic or in any way, shape, or form like that. Imagine instead that, pregnancy only lasted a week. It only took a week for a child to be born. Well, that's a little bit longer, but it doesn't seem that much longer. Like, would a woman that wanted to have an abortion when her pregnancy was going to last a week, would that be something? Would she be morally monstrous for ending the pregnancy? When it would only inconvenience her for a week. It's an interesting question. This brings us back to another slippery slope argument, where so 9 months is clearly a number, but I mean, imagine if a woman had to be pregnant for like 2 years. Well, that's a long time. If you think that 9 months, if you're like, yeah, 9 months, okay, it's wrong for someone to have an abortion at 9 months. Well, imagine it was a 10-year pregnancy. Imagine imagine pregnancies lasted really, really long periods of time. Is there an acceptable time at which you think there's that it would be okay to have an abortion at that point? It's an interesting question worth thinking about. All right, so on to the case of Kitty Genovese. This case actually is totally inaccurate, but it's worth talking about now. It's inaccurate, the inaccuracies have come to light more recently, and so don't take this seriously or like tell your friends about it. But it's worth talking about, just in this context. And Thompson mentions it. So the case of Kitty Genovese is supposed to be, as the lore goes, she was, I think, maybe raped and killed. At the very least, she was murdered behind her apartment complex, like in the like parking lot or something of her apartment complex. And there were supposedly 37 people in the apartment complex that like could see this happening outside their window and heard her screaming and calling for help. And none of them helped. And in fact, none of them even called the police. Now, think about that. That's a pretty crazy thing to have happen. There's this thing called the bystander effect that might have been in play here, where if you see a bad thing happening and there's a bunch of other people watching the bad thing happen, you think like you are less obligated to help because nobody else is helping. And so, or maybe you're sort of thinking like, oh, somebody else must have already called the police. Somebody else must already be helping. But that's clearly not the case in this case. The issue with the Kitty Genovese case is, here's the question. These people that see this horrific murder taking place that don't call the police, are they violating Kitty Genovese's rights? No, they're not doing anything to her. They're not, violating her rights at all. But are they being morally monstrous in some ways? Yes. Well, why and how and in what way? Well, they're not doing the minimally good thing that is in some way supererogatory, right? They're not doing, like, morality doesn't require of you, when you see something horrible happen, that you pick up the phone and call the police to, alert them to come. Morality doesn't require that of you, but it's the good thing to do. And insofar as it's the good thing to do, it seems like it's the morally right thing to do. Now, that's the basic idea. There are these things that are morally right to do that morality doesn't necessarily require of you. There are these things that aren't sort of hard and fast, always strict rules, but they are, good things to do. There are certain really basic things that you can do, imperfect duties that you have to promote other people's well-being, especially when it would be a little bit easy for you to do so. Now, I mean, so think about it this way, right? It's something like this. Imagine the Ryan Gosling case. Ryan Gosling, if he touches your forehead, you're COVID free and you're going to live, right? You're not going to die from the disease. Imagine though, instead of Ryan Gosling being a million miles away in Australia shooting a movie, imagine he's in the hospital that you're at, and he knows that he's in the hospital that you're at, and you know that he's in the hospital that you're at, and he's just downstairs. All he needs to do is walk up the stairs, and if he touches your forehead, you'll be cured. Well, in that case, is Ryan Gosling required to come touch your forehead? Well, no, right? He's not morally required, but wouldn't we think of him as like kind of an asshole if he didn't at that point come up and touch your forehead? Or even, more ridiculous, like suppose he's in the next room. He's just like right next door. He's visiting his sick mother, and she's in the next room while you're in the hospital, and he knows that if he comes over and touches your forehead, that you'll be cured. It would seem like, he doesn't have some sort of moral requirement to do so, but he would be not being a minimally decent Samaritan in that case. So what's going on here? Well, there's something from Thompson's point of view, and what she's thinking is that we ought to be at least minimally decent Samaritans. And what is that? Well, we ought to do all of the things that morality requires of us, and then we also ought to go above and beyond a little bit and do the things that are minimally good. So real good Samaritans are the people that go out of their way to help. And those people are great. They do everything that they're supposed to do that's morally right, and they avoid doing what's morally wrong, on top of the fact that they go out of their way all the time to help people. That's awesome. Be a good Samaritan if you can. If you can't be a good Samaritan, be a minimally decent Samaritan. That is, do a little to help on top of the fact that you're not doing anything that's morally wrong. What does morality actually require? Well, morality doesn't actually require that you even be minimally decent. Morality doesn't require anything other than that you do not violate other people's rights. And here, violating, when there are rights that are on the line, that are in conflict with one another, sometimes one right will win out over another. But you don't want to violate negative rights when you are able to. But morality doesn't require that you do anything above and beyond in order to help. So now, question is: morality the same as morality, right? It seems like we use the word morality sometimes in two different ways. Sometimes we talk about morality as having to do with these, rights and duties and obligations. And sometimes we talk about morality as having to do with what's good and what's bad, and whether or not we should do what's good or what's bad. Now, if we change the time frame with respect to pregnancy, or we change the personal cost with respect to a pregnancy, there's a good question of like what morality requires of us then, right? So, and here we can get some shiftiness, I think, right? If morality, so Imad, take the violinist case again, but think about whether or not, like, think instead of 9 months, you only have to be plugged into the violinist for an afternoon. Are you morally permitted at that point to unplug yourself from the violinist? You're plugged in. The doctor says, "Oh, we just need you here for the afternoon. Sorry you got plugged in this way, but if you unplug now, you'll kill the violinist, and we just need you for 6 more hours." Well, in that case, would it be immoral for you to unplug from the violinist? Well, you wouldn't be violating his rights. Is the idea here? His right to life, it wouldn't be. It is up against your right to your own self-determination, and so it wouldn't really be you violating one of his negative rights. It would be you, rejecting his claim to the right to your help. You're using your body to help him stay alive, according to Thompson's way of thinking about things. But it would, if you, at that point, when it's just an afternoon, it seems like something else is going on here. And it does seem like you really ought to stay plugged into the violinist and sacrifice that small amount of your time in order to save his life. There's something valuable There's something more valuable to a life than there is to 6 hours of your time. But there's something there is something different though when you ramp the time and personal cost up, right? If going through a pregnancy, or no, so if staying plugged into the violinist wasn't going to maybe it wasn't going to take you 9 months, but it was going to leave you with it was going to leave your body a little bit more wrecked. Like it was going to take some real toll on your body to stay plugged into the violinist. Well, are you obligated then to stay plugged into the violinist in that case? Not necessarily. It doesn't. It seems less so, right? And this is something for some women. Being pregnant is an excruciating endeavor. I know. There's a recent documentary that I've seen where a famous comedian, she was pregnant. It's Amy Schumer, and she had an excruciating pregnancy that really took a toll on her body. She carried the pregnancy to term and loves her child, but in those sorts of cases, if you know that a pregnancy is going to be excruciatingly difficult and take a massive toll on your body, plausibly shortening your life in the long run, are you morally required to continue to keep the pregnancy going? It seems a lot less plausible there. All right, so finally, we've got these 3 kinds of duties that Thompson really wants to kind of get out there, and this is the last thing I think we're going to talk about here to sort of get us sort of an introduction to thinking really like solid questions in ethics. So Thompson thinks there's 3 kinds of duties. There's negative perfect duties. Those are things like duties to not harm others, not to kill others, not to steal from others. There are special obligations, that is duties that like parents have to their children, that if you have a child, you are obligated to feed that child, but your neighbor's not obligated to feed that child, right? If the child is hungry, your neighbor isn't somehow obliged to feed the child. You are, though. Why are you obliged to feed the child? Because you've taken on a special obligation to that child when you took the child home from the hospital and didn't give it up for adoption, right? So special obligations are like obligations that you have to your employer, obligations that I have to you students, right? I'm your teacher. Obligations that you have to your significant other. They're obligations that you've chosen to uptake. And then there are positive imperfect duties. That is, duties that we have to help others when in need, but they're imperfect duties that we don't have them all the time. We don't have to always help others. We just have to help others, generally, sort of when it comes up and when we can. Thompson's final view then is that abortions are permissible in some cases, namely when a woman's life is on the line. That is, when there's trade-offs between 2 rights to life, an abortion is permissible then. She thinks clearly pregnancy due to rape. There's no special obligation that's been assumed. No positive duty that must be fulfilled has been created between the mother and the fetus. Basically, what Thompson's view is that when you become pregnant, you have to assume a special obligation to the fetus. And that special obligation is you allowing the fetus to continue to live and use your body. And without that special obligation, the fetus doesn't have any claim against you with respect to its right to life. Right. So even then, in the case of accidental pregnancy with contraception, again, there's no special obligation that's been assumed by the woman. And so no positive duty has been taken on. The positive duty that we have only requires us to act sometimes, and it doesn't require us to go above and beyond in all cases, sacrificing our own self-control or autonomy or plans in order to help a fetus that accidentally came into being. So Thompson thinks that we should be minimally decent. We should fulfill all of our perfect negative duties and refrain from harming others, like murdering others or stealing from others. And we should fulfill all of our special obligations. That is, any obligation that you've taken on yourself to other people, you morally ought to fulfill those. And then you should fulfill your positive imperfect duties sometimes. So when you see that you can help someone and it's not going to be a huge sacrifice for you to help them, you should do it. And if you go above and beyond a lot of the time, then you're a good Samaritan, and that's great, and that's even all the better. But morality, what it really requires of you is just that you fulfill your perfect negative duties. That is, you respect other people's perfect negative rights, where you refrain from harming others, from killing them, wrongfully, from violating their perfect rights, and fulfilling your own special obligations. All right. I think that's it for our discussion of abortion. I hope that it's been interesting for you.